Hi, I'm Jim Hendricks with Boating Magazine. Today we're going to create a rope to chain splice. Now this is a splice you need for your electric anchor windlass to feed the chain and the rope both through the windlass and feed it in and out of the anchor locker. Now I've already separated the three strands and created a whip here to keep the strands from separating any further. So let's get started with that splice. Alright, well, it's important when you're doing the rope to chain splice to secure the chain, otherwise it's going to be falling everywhere. Now the first step you want to do is feed the strands through the chain itself. So we start by feeding 1, 2 in one direction, and then we're going to feed the opposite strand in the opposite direction. So now we have 2 strands going through the chain in one direction and 1 strand going through the chain in the opposite direction. Now your next step is to start splicing into the rope itself. Usually you're going to start with one of the single strand and come through. Now that's important here is that you are getting these as tight as possible. So we've already put 1 strand through, and then what we want to do is look for the next opening in the 3 strand and put the next strand through. So that comes through just like this. Okay? So, and our goal here is to create kind of an even split between all of the various splices. So, once we get a pattern going, then it becomes very easy to get a nice, tight rope to chain splice. As you see, what we've done here is we've got all of the strands coming through the running line, and now we're just going to repeat this process for each strand. So here we go. Here goes the next one. The next one comes through like this, thusly, and then you move on to the next splice, which comes through like this. Alright? And then in to the next. Your next strand, which comes through this one right here. Now one thing I forgot to mention earlier, that is, it's helpful to tape off these ends so that when you're running these through here, the strands don't separate any further. So now we've got two of our splices done, and we're making sure they're fairly taut as we're pulling them along. Now this process is repeated until you have about 6 or 7 splices through the main running line. Once we have that done, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, now we've finished our splicing of the rope. Well, not quite, but we finished weaving the 3 strands back through the running line, and we're just about done here. We've done about 5 or 6 splices back through the rope. You don't want to get it you don't want to have too many, you don't want to have it too thick, because this still has to feed through the windlass, and so that's important. So what we did is we taped off our 3 strands and cut those off. A few other tools I want to mention that are helpful to you when you're doing this project. One is a marlin spike. This helps you kind of open up the 3-strand rope and get the strands fed back through there. The other is some tape. Masking tape will work, so will electrical tape. The other thing that you might have handy is a pair of scissors. Now the 4th item that we're going to talk about is some kind of torch or lighter or butane lighter of some sort that allow you to melt these lines and so that they don't come unraveled. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, now we've melted 2 of the ends to finish off our splice. We're going to melt the 3rd one. What you'll need is a butane torch such as this one. Basically, we've cut the end as tight as we can to the splice, and then we use the butane torch here to melt it. What you want to do is kind of let that end of that rope get kind of nice and warm and melty, and ideally it'll blend right into the rope and become part of the splice. Occasionally the wind will blow out your butane torch and you'll have to relight it, but try not to melt any other part of the line except the end of that strand that's sticking out of the splice. So once it gets kind of nice and warm and bubbly, then you can kind of let it just kind of recede into your line. And if you want, take your marlin spike, smooth it out a little bit, let it kind of become part and parcel of that splice. And there you go. So there you go. We have our rope to chain splice for use with an electric anchor windlass. This splice will feed in and out of the windlass. It'll come in and out of the anchor locker, and the more you use it, the more smooth it'll become. Now every year, season or two, you might have to redo this splice as it becomes a little frayed and worn out, but now you know how to do it. For Boating Magazine, I'm Jim Hendricks.